My dad abandoned me throughout childhood and refused to walk me down the aisle. So I chose my brother instead, and fate taught him a cruel lesson. My dad favored my sister, but she rejected him. I chose my brother to walk me down the aisle and witnessed karma hit my dad hard. Dad wanted to walk my sister down the aisle first, but she chose our stepdad, so he declined to walk me down the aisle. Now, Dad is crying and pleading with me to let him do it. Although I've never been a particularly vindictive person, I do enjoy it when karma is presented in a palpable manner, which is what has occurred. I don't care if that makes me a bad person or a lousy daughter. I couldn't be happier or more arrogant about the whole thing. After years and years of pain and emotional abuse, I am overjoyed to have finally seen justice. My father has made me feel awful as I've grown up. He suddenly remembers this daughter of his that he never really liked in the first place, now that he has no one else to rely on. Out of my 3 siblings, I, a 31-year-old female, am the middle one. Sarah, a 29-year-old female, is my younger sister, and Finley, or Finn, a 37-year-old male, is my older brother. We were a happy family for the majority of my upbringing, at least. My mom, a 59-year-old female, did her best to be an equal parent, even though my parents had their preferences. My father, a 65-year-old male, is not in the same boat. Favoritism was clearly visible in his actions. His favorite person was Sarah, and since Finn was the son, he naturally felt a connection with him, and they could bond over man things. I was, of course, left out of this dynamic. It began at a very young age. I've always had the impression that my father didn't think highly of me. I made a few attempts to express it, maybe by throwing fits because I was a challenging kid overall, but nothing I ever did got his attention. As I grew older, I came to terms with it. I believe Mom tried to make up for his partiality after noticing it because I would have remained invisible my entire life if it had been up to my father. I have always adored her for seeing me. Mom did her best to be an equitable parent, but as I mentioned, she was not flawless. She treated us the same and loved us equally, I believe. Finn noticed that she made an effort to keep me from feeling excluded. He attempted to fill in after noticing my neglect and my tendency to be distant. When Finn was learning how to change automobile tires, he would ask Dad if I could come along. When Dad taught him how to drive, he made sure I was present. Dad didn't involve me in the chats, so I know it was Finn's doing. I didn't experience abuse or anything similar. We received similar gifts, for example. I received as many new outfits as either Sarah or Finn. However, Dad never provided me with any emotional support. Mom and Finn attempted to fill that void in my life for all that time. Sarah, on the other hand, simply enjoyed playing the role of the young princess. She was a snobby child, and her attitude caused her school to raise various concerns. In some way, all of those worries were ignored. She developed into a very demanding and conceited young lady. I am not really close to her as a result. I'm really close to Finn, and he simply can't bear Sarah. Dad is the only one who does not find her behavior problematic. Mom barely puts up with her either. This is the current situation. Mom and Dad split about a decade ago. We have all been kept in the dark about the true reason for the friendly breakup. We all know that Mom and Dad's claim that they are no longer compatible is untrue. Something else is the true cause, since neither of them began dating someone new for a long period after the divorce. I am very sure it wasn't infidelity. We all still don't know the truth, and Mom and Dad have always wanted to keep it that way. There was no custody issue to deal with because we were all adults at the time. Since then, they've generally gotten along well, since, let's face it, there's no love lost there. I have personally opted to avoid seeing Dad as much as possible. I suppose it works for both of us because he hasn't voiced any complaints about my absence. When I have free time, I usually visit Mom's house, although Finn and Sarah split their time equally between the 2 locations. We never go with Sarah unless it's for Christmas, but Finn and I occasionally plan our trips to Mom's house. Finn simply cannot tolerate her. When viewed from the outside, we appear to be rather normal and functional, but for once, I am glad that things have taken a turn for the worse. Mom began dating Arthur, a 60-year-old male, 5 years ago. They clicked right away after meeting at a yoga retreat. My time with Arthur is enjoyable, and he is a cool guy. He never tries to push limits and is kind to Finn and myself. Since nobody has ever mentioned it, and I don't see any justification for him to treat Sarah badly, I'm going to presume that everything is well between them. All that matters is that Mom is happy. Even though Dad is very combative with Arthur, they have a friendly relationship. I believe it's because Dad doesn't have a steady partner, and his dating life hasn't been very successful. In addition, Mom's life is opulent in comparison to her life with Dad, and Arthur makes a lot more money than Dad does. We are all pleased for Mom, but I believe Dad is really resentful of the whole thing. The fact that we get along well with Arthur is another thing he dislikes. Dad still acts envious despite Finn's attempts to explain that none of us are taking his place and that we are simply acting like responsible adults in this scenario. All of it is very offensive and childish. Fortunately, since I don't see Dad very often, I don't have to deal with a lot of it. The dynamics of the family are as follows at the moment. Understanding the backdrop is crucial to comprehending the events of the past few days. My fiancé, Kieran, a 34-year-old male, proposed to me a few months ago. We've spent a lot of time together. I prefer to stay private, so I didn't make the engagement public right away. After choosing the date, Kieran and I informed our families since we wanted to get married as soon as possible and avoid a lengthy engagement period. 1 week from now, the wedding is planned. My family's response when I told them was conflicted. Arthur was pleased, and Finn and Mom were ecstatic. Sarah appeared pretty unhappy, but Dad's response was fairly neutral. All of this took place during a video call, and I could see that she quickly ended the call after forcing a grin. She detests not being the center of attention, so I was expecting some sort of tantrum, but at that moment, I couldn't stand her theatrics. I informed Finn that I wanted him to be the one to escort me down the aisle, not Dad, and I called him separately to gossip. He remained silent for a time and claimed that although he was deeply moved by my request, he believed it was improper to fulfill, and that Dad would make a big deal out of it. He claimed that, although he would really like to, he was unable to do so since he didn't want to annoy his father. He said something that hurt me. He understood that I needed him to be there with me since he had been my male protector far more than Dad. I informed him that I had come to him because I had been let down by Dad on multiple occasions. I hate to say it, but I also felt Finn was making sense, so I didn't argue with him about it. It was an emotional conversation. Gently, he assured me that it didn't matter if he escorted me down the aisle. It was crucial that my day be as uneventful as possible so that I could look back on it with joy and no resentment. If he were to assume Dad's position, he claimed Dad would remain agitated during the ceremony and spoil the day and the memories for me. He was correct. I knew what Finn said would make my day simpler, if not perfect, and Dad was more than capable of pulling off such a ruse. Finn advised me to discuss it with Dad. I stated I would give it some thought, and that I was hesitant to have him escort me down the aisle. Fortunately, Sarah and her boyfriend Zach announced their engagement 2 weeks later. After exchanging glances with Kieran, I knew she would try to steal the show at my wedding or do something else, but I couldn't help myself. Finn was also not very pleased. We were both aware of the timing, but we were unable to change it, so we kept quiet. One positive outcome of this is that Sarah's wedding is scheduled for approximately 5 weeks from now, 1 month after mine. The stars didn't align in her favor, so she had to be content to be the second bride in the family even though she had really wanted to marry before me. I resisted her attempts to guilt me into delaying my wedding, even though she was rather sour about it. She needed to grow up since I wasn't the type to give in to her whims. Thus, things remained unchanged. It seems that Dad and Sarah agreed that he would accompany her down the aisle before he did the same for me. I'm not really sure how they came up with something that strange, since I never had much luck with boys in school or college. I suppose they figured I wouldn't get married or would get married later. In any case, once Sarah announced her engagement, I requested Dad to accompany me down the aisle. He sadly informed me that he had promised his baby that he would accompany her first, years ago, while she was on her deathbed, which never materialized. He said he had made that commitment, and now he wouldn't be able to lead me down the aisle because he couldn't break his word and break her heart. To be honest, I was thrilled because I didn't want him to accompany me down the aisle in the first place. I was dancing within as I feigned sadness and hurt. I assured him that, even if it hurt, it didn't. I would accept his vow to Sarah because I respected it. I called Finn right away and informed him of the situation. He was upset with his father. Finn stated that he would have seized the chance to accompany me down the aisle immediately if he had known Dad would act in this manner. He said that I could choose whichever daughter I wanted to grant this privilege to if Dad could. I was too delighted to care if Finn was upset with Dad. In the end, it had turned out to be just what I had desired, and I am overjoyed. Despite the pressure of wedding planning, everything was going smoothly up until yesterday when unheard of drama entered my life. Drama for which I lacked the stamina. Everything looked to be in order despite my jitteriness and nervousness. Sarah told her father last night that he would not be accompanying her to the wedding. She requested Arthur to do it instead. We were all surprised by this. Not only that, she announced it via video call. She could have been more tactful about it, and it was cruel. We were all aware of Dad's excitement for her wedding because she and her fiancé wanted to save money for the honeymoon. He had even covered the entire cost. Dad had nearly mentally checked out of my life, and Mom and Dad were busy organizing 2 weddings. Since all of his attention was on Sarah, he had nothing to contribute or recommend and continued to show no interest in anything pertaining to my wedding. Furthermore, he had not made any financial contributions to my wedding. Kieran and I were paying for it ourselves. It had gotten to the point where I was depending more on Mom and Arthur's advice than on Dad's. In contrast to Sarah, Arthur was actively involved in my wedding preparations. Because of this, even Arthur appeared surprised by Sarah's request, or rather her demand, and was unsure of how to react. When Mom finally stated that Arthur would love to do it, he continued to stare at her. I work in corporate, where terrible calls are almost a given, but that had to be one of the worst calls I've ever been on. Dad was crying. He began cursing out Arthur instead of discussing it with Sarah and then hung up. That was all. I didn't ask Dad how he was feeling, but I'm sure the others did. I quickly hung up the phone since I had too many other things to think about. Besides, this wasn't my problem. He didn't want to renege on the commitment he had made to Sarah. It was between them if she broke it. I didn't want or intend to step in. They were able to resolve it among themselves. I wasn't interested in becoming involved in trivial family matters at this time. I had no idea that it would soon cause me great annoyance. A few hours after his little princess dealt him a heartbreaking blow, Dad called me last night in tears on the phone. He was crying and telling that he would love to walk me down the aisle now and that he was foolish for turning down my offer. I was shocked by what I heard. It was astonishing how entitled they were. Although I was sorry for what had transpired, I gently explained to him that it was between him and Sarah. It had no bearing whatsoever on my wedding plans. I informed him that this had been decided months prior and that Finn was escorting me down the aisle. I also informed him that I was unable to make a last-minute modification. He promised to speak with Finn, saying that I didn't need to be concerned about Finn's disagreement because Finn was merely a placeholder for him. I explained to him that I didn't want to hurt Finn, not that he agreed. Dad didn't need to know that I didn't want him to be my father in the first place. I informed Dad that no swap was taking place despite his insistence that he speak with Finn and make amends. The final step was for Finn to lead me down the aisle. He believed I was resisting because Finn wouldn't resign and he was living in total denial. He was sure he could persuade Finn not to do it. After hanging up, I called Finn right away to let him know what was happening. It would be an understatement to say that Finn was furious. I informed him that I had always wanted him to be the one to reveal my identity. When he asked what I wanted, only at his encouragement did I ask Dad in the first place, and he was the first person I had asked. I replied in the affirmative. When Finn asked if I was certain I wanted him to lead me down the aisle, then he assured me that if Dad phoned him, he would correct him, and that I shouldn't worry about anything since his favorite had sent him out. I told Finn that I didn't want any drama at the wedding, and that Dad needed to realize that he couldn't just walk in any time he wanted and use me as a stand-in daughter. Finn reassured me that there would be no alteration to the wedding arrangements and that he would make sure Dad knew about it. I haven't spoken to either of them since last evening. I'm getting so anxious about it. I truly don't have the energy to handle this turmoil at this time, and everything was going smoothly. I'm not sure if I should get in touch with them or hold off until I find out what transpired between Finn and Dad. I'm not even sure whether Finn has had a conversation with him yet. The anxiousness is making me queasy and I'm at a loss for what to do. Finn and I eventually spoke, and the situation is a complete mess. Even worse than I had anticipated. Fortunately, he has taken care of the majority of it, so I won't have any issues. Finn claimed that he had been expecting a call from Dad to talk about the alleged change in plans, but the call never arrived. Finn recognized then that Dad was not going to talk about anything. Dad reasoned that since he had made the decision to accompany me down the aisle, everyone else must have agreed after waiting a day for Dad to get in touch. Finn called him because I had mentioned something. He asked Dad if the arrangements had changed, in an attempt to appear casual. Dad said that because Sarah would no longer be walking me down the aisle, I had requested him to do so now. Finn, the more reasonable and level-headed of the three of us, is typically diplomatic. I was shocked to hear that he went completely crazy on Dad. Finn claimed that since they both knew I hadn't requested Dad to accompany me down the aisle, he urged him to stop being so rude. Rather, Dad had pleaded for the part after his beloved daughter had turned him down. Dad was enraged to hear this. When faced with the truth or anything he doesn't want to hear, he has a tendency to react violently. Finn, however, told Dad to stop talking and listen for once before he could interfere. Finn stated that, considering how he had treated me over the years, Dad should be thankful that he was even receiving an invitation to my wedding. Then Finn relaxed. He later expressed regret to me for snapping at Dad, particularly so near the wedding, but he said he was unable to control himself. Finn longed for Dad to see his true self and shed the mask he was wearing. Finn admitted to Dad that he had always given preference to Sarah, and had, at most, tried to get along with Finn, but I was never given any thought. In addition, he brought up the fact that I had requested Finn to accompany me down the aisle. I had only asked Dad at first because of Finn's persistence. Finn stated that he had thought Dad would use the occasion to begin repairing our relationship, but Dad squandered his opportunity. Finn said that none of his kids liked or respected Dad, calling him a failure of a father because he wasn't a fair parent. He didn't respect him. He never made an effort to love me or treat me like his daughter, so I didn't respect him. Sarah also didn't respect him, since she wouldn't have pulled the prank she did if she did. Finn went on to claim that Dad was the source of Sarah's conceited demeanor. After years of lavishing her with attention, he was now having to deal with the fallout. Finn claimed that since Dad had been throwing out his other children since they were born, it was only fitting that his favorite child would throw him out. Finn told me that, although he didn't remember everything because he had shouted in a blinding passion, he did admit that he had spoken more. He reassured me that I didn't have to be concerned about Dad pulling any tricks after he got a harsh reality check, and Finn would take care of it right away if he did. Finn also clarified that the plans remained unchanged. He wouldn't alter the fact that he would be the one to lead me down the aisle. I was more than grateful that he apologized for the drama so close to the wedding. I've never been able to defend myself with such strength in my life. I always believed that I might have done something wrong for Dad to not love me. Over the years, I made an effort to get over that emotion, but I was never successful. Here, I had my brother standing up for me, which I never thought anyone would do. When we were children, my mother ought to have defended me, but she didn't. She never challenged Dad, but she made an effort to compensate for the lack of affection in her own manner. Her diffidence and deference to him gave me the impression that I would never be able to confront him about how awful he was to me, though I don't blame her for it. Only because my brother loved me so much that he could no longer stand the idea of my going through this did that change. I was choking when I told him that this was the most beautiful thing anyone had ever done for me, and I was crying by the time he finished recounting the entire episode. It must be the greatest thing I could ever hope for, but I doubt Finn understands the extent of what he has done. I'm married now. In fact, Kieran and I are presently enjoying our honeymoon in Thailand after getting married a few days ago. Despite some turmoil beforehand, the wedding went off without a hitch. Dad couldn't walk even one daughter down the aisle, and Finn wasn't going to back down. The situation has become really bad. Dad was primarily worried about how his extended family would perceive him if he did not attend the weddings of both children. During his conversation with Finn, he kept returning to this subject. Once more, Finn bluntly informed him that he was emotionally checked out with me anyway, so he was missing the role of father, at least for my wedding. Finn advised him to express gratitude for the invitation in the first place. Since Sarah was his favorite, Dad could only wonder what went wrong with her, and no one truly knows why she did what she did. When word came out, Sarah had the gall to phone me and claim that it was unjust to Dad and that I wanted him to walk me down the aisle because she couldn't. Since she was using Dad's money to pay for her wedding and had expelled him, I encouraged her to have a life. I informed her that I had visited Dad and that due to some foolish pledge she was unable to keep, he had decided to accompany her down the aisle. She was more than welcome to change things up at her wedding, if she was so offended by her beloved father's misery. Since she was feeling awful about Dad, I assured her that Arthur would understand, and that I could even speak with him on her behalf. She ended the call since she had nothing more to say. Before the wedding, I called Finn and informed him that I didn't want to be involved in any more father drama. If it came to me, it was his duty to make sure I was finished with this. I couldn't allow Dad to ruin my day because I had 100 other things to be happy about or worried about. I couldn't allow him to ruin my most memorable day because he had already made me miserable for most of my life. Finn assured me that he would handle everything, and that I shouldn't worry. It would be an understatement to say that I was really anxious on my wedding day. But fortunately, everything went smoothly. I'm glad Dad didn't try to start anything, even though he appeared to be rather glum. After a point, I was too preoccupied with having fun to give his pouty face much thought. It was awkward between them, and Sarah tried to avoid Dad as much as possible, but I didn't mind. I'm happy that nobody was able to ruin the wedding because it went off without a hitch. I could feel Dad glaring daggers at my back as Finn led me down the aisle, but that was all he could do. According to what I've been informed, Dad has been left to handle some damage control after a few people questioned why Finn was up there instead of him. That's his cross to carry. Then, in order to live a peaceful existence and eliminate any possibility of turmoil, I also want Sarah's wedding to be over. I'm going to cut off communication with Dad for the foreseeable future after her wedding. In any case, I don't see the need to keep in contact with him. Yesterday was Sarah's wedding. She didn't ask Kieran and me to the wedding, so I wouldn't know how it went. I'm not sure what she was trying to accomplish, but I was more than willing to watch. It was just Mom, Arthur, and Dad there, and, to her dismay, Finn did not go either. At the last minute, Dad reportedly hoped she would change her mind and ask him to lead her down the aisle, but that never occurred. It was quite unpleasant, and it's clear from the pictures she shared that Arthur would much rather be somewhere else. Mom is just finished, Dad is glum, and Arthur is uneasy. I don't really care, but aside from that, her wedding went smoothly. I was called up by Mom to provide these details. Naturally, Dad is unhappy because he had hoped that at least one of us would give in and allow him to do as he pleases. Now, however, his personal life is in disarray, and all of his children are essentially cut off from him. I don't care that he isn't handling it well. For being such a bad father to me, allowing me to have a miserable childhood, and even helping to cause it, I genuinely believe it serves him right. I've had enough of him, and I don't want Sarah's or his poison to affect this new stage of my life or my new family. I'm relieved they are no longer in my life,